Harold Grayson, an ailing 78-year-old historian, embarks on a journey to Egypt as his dying wish. Once a man of great vigor, now burdened by failing health, Harold's trip is meant to fulfill his lifelong passion for ancient civilizations. Wandering through the sun-drenched sands, he stumbles upon a forgotten crypt beneath the ruins of Luxor. There he discovers a relic, a glowing scarab etched with mysterious symbols. Little does Harold know, this relic is about to rewrite his destiny. Harold Grayson sat in the dim office of his doctor, the words 6 months at most echoing in his mind. At 78, Harold wasn't afraid of death, but he loathed the thought of leaving unfinished dreams behind. Egypt had been the focus of his life's research, a land of mysteries and legends he had longed to see. Now, with time slipping away, he decided his final days would be spent there. 3 weeks later, Harold boarded a flight to Cairo. His once vigorous frame was now frail, and every movement required effort. But as the plane soared above the clouds, a spark of vitality returned. He wasn't just a dying man, he was a historian on a quest. Egypt, with its sands steeped in history, awaited him. Landing in Cairo felt like stepping into another world. The chaotic streets buzzed with energy, the scent of spices mingling with the desert air. Harold met Tariq, a guide whose sharp eyes and confident demeanor suggested a man familiar with the secrets of this ancient land. "You don't want the tourist version of Egypt, do you?" Tariq asked with a smirk. "Not a chance," Harold replied. Their first stop was the Great Pyramid of Giza. Harold stood in awe of its towering majesty, his hand brushing the ancient stone. Tariq watched as the older man closed his eyes, soaking in the moment. "It's eternal," Harold murmured, more to himself than to Tariq. Over the next few days they explored quieter corners of the country, crumbling temples, forgotten tombs, and villages long abandoned by time. Each discovery seemed to breathe life into Harold's weary soul. Yet a nagging feeling persisted, as if something deeper was calling to him. He mentioned it to Tariq one night under the stars. "Egypt has a way of finding those who seek it," Tariq said thoughtfully. His words stayed with Harold, lingering in his mind as they traveled to Luxor. Tariq had promised to show Harold a site untouched by tourists or scholars. When they arrived, it appeared to be little more than rubble scattered across the sand. Tariq handed Harold a brush, and together they worked to uncover the past. Hours later, they revealed a stone slab etched with hieroglyphs. Harold knelt beside it, his fingers tracing the ancient carvings. Before he could decipher the symbols, a gust of wind stirred the sands, revealing a hidden passage leading underground. "Shall we?" Tariq asked, his tone mixing excitement with caution. Harold nodded, his heart pounding. Descending into the dark passage, he felt a strange pull, a sense that this was more than a trip to satisfy his curiosity. Something awaited him in the depths, something that could change everything. The descent into the narrow passage was suffocating, the air thick with the scent of age and decay. Harold clutched a lantern as Tariq led the way, footsteps echoing in the confined space. Dim light revealed walls covered in ancient carvings, hieroglyphs that seemed to ripple under the flickering glow. Despite the strain on his body, Harold felt alive, pulled deeper by the mystery ahead. "This tomb is not on any map," Tariq said, his voice low. "I found it years ago but never ventured far. Something about it unsettles me." Harold paused, fingers brushing a line of hieroglyphs. "This isn't just a tomb," he whispered. "These markings, they're protective spells. Warnings." Tariq raised an eyebrow. "Warnings of what?" "Something worth hiding," Harold replied, his heart quickening. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Harold's lantern illuminated intricate murals of a pharaoh wielding a glowing scarab. The figure stood tall, surrounded by kneeling subjects, as if the relic granted divine authority. Beneath the mural, a stone pedestal stood empty. faint impressions where an object once rested. "It was here," Harold murmured. "This scarab. It was revered, feared." Before Tarik could respond, a distant rumble echoed. Dust rained from the ceiling as the ground trembled. "We should go," Tarik urged, but Harold's eyes were drawn to an alcove behind the pedestal. Something gleamed faintly within. Ignoring protests, Harold reached for the object inside. The moment his fingers touched it, energy surged through him, forcing him to stagger back. He held it to the lantern's light, a scarab, etched with pulsing symbols. "What have you done?" Tarik hissed, pale-faced. "I don't know," Harold whispered. The scarab felt warm, almost alive. Visions flooded his mind, ancient battles, a pharaoh commanding armies, and a final act of sealing it away. The rumbling grew louder. "We're leaving," Tarik shouted, dragging Harold toward the exit. They raced as stones fell around them, the ancient structure groaning under their intrusion. They emerged into blinding sunlight, collapsing onto the sand as the entrance caved behind them. Tarik turned, a mix of anger and fear on his face. "You shouldn't have taken it." "I didn't take it," Harold replied, his grip tightening. "It called to me." Over days, Harold and Tarik studied the scarab's symbols. Harold's health, once frail, seemed to improve. His hands steady, his steps stronger. Tarik noticed the change but said nothing, his unease growing. One night, Harold awoke to a strange tugging, as if the scarab was pulling him. He stepped into the cool desert, following the invisible pull. Tarik caught up, his concern evident. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I don't know," Harold admitted, "but it's showing me the way." The scarab led them to a rocky outcrop and another hidden entrance. Inside, golden inlays lined the walls, and incense filled the air. At the end of the tunnel lay a second chamber. In its center stood a pedestal, identical to the first. "This is no coincidence," Harold murmured. "It's a trail, a path laid by the ancients." "To what end?" Tarik asked. Harold didn't answer. The scarab wasn't just guiding him, it was testing him. Whatever lay at the end of this trail would either complete his journey or consume him. The second chamber was smaller than the first, but equally imposing. Carvings lined the walls depicting scenes of worship, conflict, and celestial events. Harold's eyes darted from one image to the next, historian instincts alive. The centerpiece of the room was a pedestal, untouched by time, identical to the one they had seen before. "Do you think the scarab belongs here too?" Tarik asked, his voice hushed. Harold studied the pedestal as the scarab in his hand began to hum faintly. "Possibly," he replied, "but why two pedestals in separate chambers?" "Maybe there's more than one relic," Tarik said. The thought sent a shiver through Harold. If the scarab held such power, what could the others do? His grip tightened on the artifact, a memory of the vision flashing, an ancient pharaoh wielding the scarab's might in battle. The scarab seemed part of something far larger. As Harold approached the pedestal, the scarab grew warmer. It felt alive, aware of its surroundings. When he placed it on the pedestal, the air shifted. A low hum filled the chamber, and the carvings glowed faintly. Harold and Tarik exchanged stunned glances. "What is this?" Tarik whispered, stepping back. The light intensified, and the walls rippled like water. Suddenly, a beam of light shot from the scarab, illuminating a hidden passage in the far corner. "It's a map," Harold murmured. "A guide to something greater." Tarik's unease was evident. "We should leave it," he said, though Harold shook his head. "We've come too far." The hidden passage was steep, forcing them to move slowly. The air grew cooler as they descended, Harold's lantern casting eerie shadows. The faint sound of water echoed, a reminder of how deep they were. At the end, they entered another chamber, larger and more ornate. Gold artifacts were scattered, jewelry, weapons, and statues of gods. But Harold's eyes fixed on the far wall. a massive mural of the pharaoh holding the scarab aloft, ascending to the heavens. "This isn't just a tomb," Harold said in awe. "It's a shrine to the scarab's power." "Or a warning," Tariq muttered. Harold approached the mural, his fingers tracing the etched lines. The scarab pulsed faintly in his hand, responding to the images. Beneath the mural, an inscription caught his eye. He crouched, carefully translating. "He who wields the scarab shall command the heavens and earth," Harold read aloud. "But beware, for power unbalanced invites ruin." Tariq's unease deepened. "Harold, this is madness. Whatever this is, it's dangerous. We should leave it here." "No," Harold said, his determination unwavering. "This is history unfolding." A low rumble shook the chamber. Dust fell, artifacts rattled, and the scarab's glow intensified, its warmth now almost unbearable. "It's reacting to something," Harold said. "We need to find out what." The far side of the room held another passageway. Harold felt the scarab pulling him forward, guiding his steps. Tariq hesitated, but followed. As they ventured deeper, Harold knew they were nearing the heart of the mystery. The scarab wasn't just a relic. It was a key to unlocking a forgotten world. What lay ahead was unknown, but Harold felt certain. There was no turning back. The passage narrowed as Harold and Tariq pushed forward, the lantern's light flickering on fragmented carvings. These etchings were chaotic, unlike the grand murals before. Harold paused, fingers tracing the rough lines. "These are warnings," he said, "hastily made, but clear." "Warnings of what?" Tariq asked. "I don't know," Harold admitted, pressing on. The new chamber felt oppressive, its walls bare except for an obelisk covered in glowing symbols. The scarab in Harold's hand vibrated faintly, drawn to the artifact. "I don't like this," Tariq muttered. As Harold placed the scarab on the obelisk, light exploded around them. Scenes of ancient rulers wielding the scarab appeared on the walls. At first triumphant, the images grew darker. Kings betraying their people, kingdoms crumbling. The visions ended abruptly, and Harold staggered as whispers filled his mind, speaking an ancient tongue. "What's happening to you?" Tariq asked, catching him as he stumbled. Harold's trembling eased, replaced by a strange vitality. His mind felt sharp, his body steadier than it had been in years. "I think the scarab is healing me." Tariq frowned. "Or changing you." Over days, Harold's health visibly improved, yet strange dreams plagued him. Visions of the pharaohs and the scarab's destructive power. One night, the whispers returned, urging him to seek the relic's true purpose. "It's not just a relic," Harold told Tariq. "It's part of a balance." Tariq remained skeptical. "It feels more like a curse." Harold ignored him, piecing together inscriptions they had copied. The scarab was one of 3 relics, each representing creation, balance, or destruction. Together they governed order, but if misused, they could unleash chaos. "The scarab needs the others," Harold realized. "Only then can its purpose be fulfilled." Before Tariq could protest, footsteps echoed outside their camp. Tariq grabbed a knife as a group of figures approached. Their leader stepped forward, his voice calm yet commanding. "The scarab belongs to us." Harold clutched the artifact protectively. "It belongs to history." "You have no idea what you found," the leader said. "Hand it over or face the consequences." The scarab glowed fiercely, releasing a wave of energy that sent the intruders sprawling. Stunned, Harold stared at the artifact. It was no longer just a relic. It was a force beyond comprehension. "This isn't over," the leader warned before retreating into the night. Tariq turned to Harold. "Now, do you believe me? This thing is dangerous." Harold nodded but remained resolute. "Dangerous, yes. but it's also the key to something greater. We have to see this through. As dawn broke, they packed their camp and followed the scarab's silent call. The sun rose high as Harold and Tariq ventured deeper into the desert, the scarab glowing faintly in Harold's hand. Its pull led them further from civilization, and Tariq's unease grew with each step. "They won't give up," Tariq said. "Whoever they are, they've been after this relic for a long time." "Then we must move faster," Harold replied, gripping the scarab tightly. By mid-afternoon, they reached a craggy expanse dotted with caves. The scarab pulsed warmly, guiding Harold to a specific opening. The air inside was damp, and the scent of decay lingered as they descended. Harold's lantern illuminated carvings, hieroglyphs depicting celestial balance and chaos. "These carvings," Harold whispered, "they tell a story." He traced the symbols carefully, translating as he went. The three relics: creation, balance, and destruction. Together they governed harmony, but if one was misused— He trailed off, unwilling to finish. The passage opened into a grand chamber, at its center a massive stone tablet covered in intricate hieroglyphs. Harold's breath caught. "This is a chronicle," he murmured, "a record of a kingdom that wielded the relics." The story was clear. A golden age fueled by the relic's power, followed by greed, misuse, and catastrophic collapse. Plagues, floods, and wars destroyed the kingdom, leaving only ruins. Tariq crossed his arms. "And now we've awakened one of those relics." "Not just awakened it," Harold said, his voice grim. "Reactivated it." Suddenly, a faint noise echoed through the chamber. Harold froze, his lantern casting long shadows. "Did you hear that?" Tariq nodded, gripping his knife. The sound grew louder, footsteps approaching. The intruders had found them. "Hide the scarab," Tariq hissed. Harold slipped it into his jacket and they retreated into the shadows. Moments later, figures entered, their leader's voice firm and commanding. "We know you're here. Surrender the scarab." Harold's pulse quickened, but the scarab began to glow, its warmth spreading through him. The light betrayed their hiding spot and the intruders advanced. Tariq lunged at the nearest man and chaos erupted. In the commotion, Harold stumbled backward, pressing the scarab against the stone tablet. A surge of energy burst forth, filling the chamber with blinding light. The carvings glowed as the walls trembled. The intruders froze, weapons clattering to the ground. "You've activated it," their leader whispered, awe and fear on his face. The energy subsided, and Tariq grabbed Harold, pulling him toward the exit. "We need to leave. Now." Outside, Tariq rounded on him. "This is out of control. That thing isn't just dangerous, it's alive." Harold met his gaze, resolve burning in his eyes. "Then we need to understand it. The scarab is leading us to something greater." Tariq sighed but didn't argue. They packed quickly, the desert stretching endlessly before them, the scarab's glow steady as it guided them toward the unknown. The desert night was cold and quiet as Harold and Tariq moved onward, guided by the scarab's faint glow. The moon cast long shadows across the dunes, and unease settled over them like a shroud. "They'll come after us," Tariq said. "They know what you have, and they won't stop." Harold glanced at the scarab, its glow reflecting in his eyes. "Then we have to stay ahead." By morning, they reached an abandoned caravan route marked by crumbling ruins. The scarab pulsed steadily, leading them to a half-buried structure. Inside, they found faded murals of celestial balance and chaos. Harold studied the images. "It's a map," he said, pointing to a constellation above a pyramid. "It shows the second relic's location." Tariq frowned. "And what happens if we find it? You've seen what one relic can do." Before Harold could answer, a distant rumble interrupted them. Dust rose on the horizon as engines approached. The intruders had found them. "Run," Tariq said, pulling Harold into the ruins. The scarab flickered as shouts grew closer. Tariq led Harold through narrow passages, pausing to listen. "They're closing in." Harold glanced at the scarab, its glow intensifying. "It's leading us somewhere. We have to trust it." Reluctantly, Tariq followed as the scarab guided them into a cavernous chamber beneath the sand. The walls shimmered with living hieroglyphs, pulsating faintly. In the center stood a pedestal. "This is another marker," Harold said. "The scarab is showing us the way." Their pursuers burst into the chamber, guns drawn. The leader stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Enough games. Hand over the scarab, or your journey ends here." Harold clutched the scarab, feeling its power surge. "You don't understand. Misusing it could destroy everything." The leader smirked. "Then I'll take that risk." The scarab flared to life, releasing a wave of energy that threw the intruders back. The chamber trembled as symbols on the walls shifted into new patterns. Tariq pulled Harold toward the exit. "We have to go. Now." They fled as the chamber collapsed behind them, sand and stone falling in a deafening roar. Outside, the desert offered no refuge, only vast emptiness. They moved quickly, the scarab's glow dimming. Tariq glanced back. "They won't stop." "I know," Harold said, "but we're close to something bigger. We have to reach it first." As night fell, they camped on a rocky plateau under the stars. Harold studied the scarab, its faint glow barely illuminating his hands. He thought of the mural and the map it revealed. "This is just the beginning," he murmured. Tariq sighed. "I hope this relic is worth it, because it's going to get us killed." Harold didn't reply. Lost in thought, he resolved to follow the scarab's guidance, no matter the cost. The scarab's pull grew stronger as Harold and Tariq ventured deeper into the desert. Days passed in a blur, the relentless sun testing their endurance. Harold, however, felt invigorated, his strength surpassing anything he had experienced in years. Tariq grew more wary. "You're changing, Harold," Tariq said one evening by the fire. "That thing, it's doing something to you." Harold regarded the scarab in his hand, its glow steady. "It's helping me, not changing me." "Or using you," Tariq muttered, but Harold ignored him. The next morning, the scarab led them to jagged cliffs towering over the desert. A narrow, treacherous path spiraled upward. At the summit, they faced a massive stone doorway carved into the cliffside, covered in hieroglyphs and unfamiliar symbols. "This is it," Harold whispered. The scarab vibrated as he pressed it against the door. Light cascaded across the carvings and the stone groaned, sliding open to reveal a dark passage. Tariq hesitated. "Do we really want to go in there?" "We have to," Harold said, stepping inside. The air was cool, thick with earth and stone. The passage descended sharply, lit only by the scarab's faint glow. Soon they emerged into a vast chamber lined with golden statues and inscriptions. At its center stood a raised platform with 3 stone pedestals. "This is a testing ground," Harold said, reading the inscriptions. "The scarab's purpose can only be revealed through trials." Tariq frowned. "Trials? What kind?" The chamber trembled and a deep voice echoed in an ancient tongue. Harold felt the scarab pulse in his hand, and suddenly the room changed. The walls vanished, and Harold stood alone in a barren wasteland. "Tariq!" he called, but there was no reply. Figures materialized around him, shadows from his past, faces of those he had wronged and regrets he couldn't escape. They spoke, their voices harsh. "You abandoned us." "You never tried." Harold felt crushed under their words. "I didn't know. I didn't understand," he whispered. The scarab flared, its energy coursing through him. He straightened, his voice firm. "I can't change the past, but I can make the future right." The shadows hesitated, then dissolved into light. The wasteland faded, and Harold found himself back in the chamber. Tariq stood nearby, confusion on his face. "What just happened?" Tariq asked. "A trial," Harold said, his voice trembling. "I had to face my failures." Before Tariq could respond, the second pedestal lit up, and the chamber began to shift again. This time, Tariq vanished, and Harold was plunged into darkness. Harold stumbled through the darkness, guided only by the scarab's faint glow. He called for Tariq, but his voice echoed unanswered. The chamber had shifted, leaving him alone in a space that felt infinite yet suffocating. The air was charged, pressing heavily against his skin. The scarab's glow brightened, revealing a path beneath his feet. Harold followed it cautiously, each step drawing him closer to the unknown. The path led to a platform suspended in darkness. At its center stood a statue of a pharaoh holding a scarab aloft, its likeness eerily similar to the one Harold carried. The scarab in Harold's hand pulsed, resonating with the statue. Inscriptions at the base shifted until they formed words he could understand. "Balance is the key to power. Without it, chaos reigns." The scarab vibrated as a deep voice filled the space. "Do you seek the truth?" "Yes," Harold said, his voice trembling but resolute. "I need to understand." The statue's eyes glowed and a burst of light surrounded Harold. Visions consumed him. The three relics in their prime, representing creation, balance, and destruction. Together they maintained harmony. But misuse brought devastation, plagues, wars, and the collapse of civilizations. Harold saw a pharaoh, corrupted by the scarab's power, using it for domination. The relics were hidden to prevent further ruin, scattered to safeguard their purpose. The vision faded, leaving Harold on his knees, overwhelmed. "Will you wield this power wisely?" the voice asked, softer now. "Or will you fall as others have?" Harold hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down. "I don't want power," he said. "I want to protect it." The statue dimmed, and Harold was back in the chamber with Tariq, who looked shaken. "What happened?" Tariq asked. "I saw the relic's history," Harold said. "They're meant for balance, but bring destruction if misused." Before Tariq could reply, the chamber trembled. Stones fell as the scarab flared brightly, revealing a new passage. "It's leading us again," Harold said. Tariq hesitated. "Every step we take brings us closer to something we might not survive." "We can't stop now," Harold said. "If we do, others will take this power and destroy everything." Reluctantly, Tariq followed. The passage grew colder, and the walls pulsed with energy. Distant voices echoed. The intruders were closing in. Harold quickened his pace, the weight of the scarab's purpose heavy on his mind. The passage ended in a grand chamber, with an altar at its center. Symbols on its surface shifted and shimmered. Harold approached cautiously, the scarab trembling in his hand. "This is it," he said, "the heart of it all." Tariq stood back, scanning the room nervously. "Whatever you're about to do, Harold, be sure. There's no going back." Harold nodded, his resolve firm. The scarab's glow intensified as he placed it on the altar. The room erupted in light, and Harold braced himself for the final trial. The chamber erupted in blinding light as Harold placed the scarab on the altar. The ground trembled, and the symbols on the altar glowed brightly. Tariq shielded his eyes, stepping back as the energy intensified. "What's happening?" Tariq shouted. "It's the final trial," Harold said, his voice trembling. "The relic is awakening." The scarab floated above the altar, its glow expanding outward. A deep voice resonated through the chamber. "Balance must be restored. Do you accept the burden of this power?" Harold hesitated, the weight of the question heavy. Images of destruction caused by the relics flashed in his mind. Chaos, suffering. But he also saw moments of hope and harmony when the relics were balanced. "Yes," Harold said finally, "I will protect it." The scarab's energy surged, and Harold was consumed by a vision. He stood atop a massive staircase overlooking a thriving desert city, its temple glowing with the relic's power. But the vision shifted. Darkness consumed the city as greed corrupted the relic's balance, leaving ruin in its wake. The vision ended, and Harold found himself back in the chamber. Tariq stood nearby, pale. "Harold, what did you see?" "The relic's purpose, and the destruction their misuse brings," Harold said. Before they could speak further, the ground shook violently. Voices and footsteps echoed from the passageway. The intruders had arrived. Their leader stepped into the chamber, his eyes fixed on the scarab. "You've activated it," the leader said, a smile spreading across his face. "Good. That will make taking it easier." Harold stepped forward. "You don't understand. This power isn't for domination. It's meant to preserve balance." The leader laughed. "You think I care? That relic holds power beyond imagination, and it will be mine." Tariq moved beside Harold, his knife drawn. "You'll have to go through us first." The leader signaled his men, who raised their weapons. The air thickened as the scarab pulsed, reacting to the tension. Harold felt its energy surge, matching his heartbeat. "Harold," Tariq whispered, "if you're going to do something, now's the time." Harold reached for the scarab. A golden wave erupted, throwing the intruders back. The leader struggled to rise, fury on his face. "You don't know what you're doing." Harold held firm. "This power isn't for any of us. It's meant to protect balance." With one final surge, the scarab's light enveloped the chamber. The symbols glowed brighter, stabilizing the trembling ground. The intruders retreated, their leader cursing as he followed. Silence returned. Tariq turned to Harold, awe and relief on his face. "What now?" Harold looked at the scarab, now dim. "We find the other relics and hide them where they can't be misused." Tariq nodded, determination matching Harold's. Together they left the chamber, the scarab guiding them toward the next destination and the final challenge. The desert stretched endlessly as Harold and Tariq followed the scarab's faint glow. Each step carried the weight of what they had uncovered. Harold's body ached, but his resolve burned brighter than ever. This was the end, one way or another. Their path led to a remote canyon, where a colossal stone pyramid rose from the sands. The scarab pulsed in Harold's hand, urging him forward. "This is it," Harold said, "the place where it all ends." Tariq scanned the area, wary, and the place where it all could go wrong. They entered through a jagged opening, the air cool and heavy. The scarab's glow brightened as they descended into a vast chamber. At its center stood 3 pedestals arranged in a triangle, glowing faintly. Harold approached and placed the scarab on one pedestal. Light erupted, spreading to the others. The room filled with an ancient, powerful energy. From the shadows, the intruders emerged, their leader smiling coldly. "You've brought us exactly where we needed to be." Tariq stepped forward, knife in hand. "Stay back." The leader laughed. "Do you think you can stop us?" He gestured to his men, who raised their weapons. Harold turned to Tariq. "I know what I have to do." "What are you talking about?" Tariq asked. "The relics weren't meant for anyone to control," Harold said. "They must be sealed away. For good." Before Tariq could respond, Harold touched the scarab. It flared with light, the pedestals responding in a brilliant vortex. The leader shouted commands, but his men faltered, blinded by the intensity. The voice of the relics echoed. "Are you willing to sacrifice everything to restore balance?" "Yes," Harold said. "To protect this world, I'll give everything." The energy surged, enveloping Harold in a blinding glow. Tariq called out to him, but the sound was lost. The chamber shook violently as the light expanded, forcing everyone to flee. When the light faded, the pedestals no longer glowed, and the scarab lay dormant. Harold was gone. Tariq knelt where his friend had stood, grief and awe mixing in his expression. The intruders had fled, their ambitions thwarted. The relics were safe, their power sealed. Outside, the desert was calm. Tariq stood at the pyramid's entrance, the scarab in his hand. Its light had faded, but its purpose was clear. "He gave everything to protect this," Tariq murmured, "and I won't let his sacrifice be in vain." With a heavy heart, Tariq buried the scarab in the sands near the pyramid, ensuring its secrets would remain hidden. He turned and began his journey back, vowing to honor Harold's legacy by protecting the relic's story from falling into the wrong hands. As dawn broke over the horizon, the desert swallowed the pyramid once more, leaving only whispers of what had transpired. Harold's sacrifice would fade into legend, but his legacy would endure. A reminder that balance always comes at a cost.